Hey guys, Mrs. Dukoski here for your chapter 9, Catcher in the Rye lesson. So we will begin in a minute. Before we do that, we're going to start with our Be Now. So our Be Now today, I'm going to kind of build on from the chapter 8 Be Now. So again, a Be Now is where we just kind of get focused, we get our energy prepared for the lesson. You could do that a couple different ways. I'm a big fan again of like yoga, meditation, breath work, but just something, the idea is that it's bringing you into the now, so that wherever your mind is or your body is, that before you sit down for a lesson, that you're really trying to like get yourself ready to concentrate and ready to learn. So our Be Now is going to build on from the last lesson, which was a plank pose. So in the last lesson, we did a plank pose together, and I mentioned that there's this thing called side plank too, and I said, oh, maybe next time we'll do side plank. So we are going to do side plank. So I'm going to just show you a quick, easy sequence where you can go from your plank pose to what's called a side plank pose. And you can kind of go back and forth. And I'm a big fan of like letting it flow. So wherever you are, a lot of people just sort of like have different approaches to how they do physical practices. And some people are very, rigid about their practice and like their poses to be exact. And then there's other people who like to let it flow. So I'm more of the, I appreciate poses, but I also like to let them flow if I'm feeling it. So I'll give you a couple options of how to go from plank pose to a side plank. There's modified versions, and then there's like just opening up and seeing where your practice can go from there. And again, these physical practices help prepare us to then sit and concentrate, and they're also fun, and that's important. So before we get started with catcher, just find a space, an empty space. I have a yoga mat. You don't even need a yoga mat, but just a space where you can spread out a little bit and get ready to get into your body for a moment before we do our mental work. So here I am. Get you. My dog's here too. She's ready. That's Mila. She's got to learn side plank today. Mila, you gonna learn side plank with us? We'll see if we can keep her in the frame here. All right. So for plank pose, we did that yesterday. It's always kind of nice to start on your hands and knees. So you've got your hands. Hands are so important in a yoga practice. So you've got your hands really spread wide and flat on the floor. So my palm right here is like pushing into the mat, and my fingers are like really spreading wide. I can feel the energy through them. So I've got my hands really engaged and pressing on the floor so that my back can puff up, because I don't want to be sinking, right? I want my back to be strong, and I want my core to be engaged. So my like belly almost is up and in. There's this feeling like of an engagement in your abdomen. And then I feel strong, so that when I can get my feet going, and maybe I do one foot at a time, I've got this strong hands, elbows turn out, hands are pushing into the floor, almost like you're ready for a push-up, right? And then maybe I'm here. So I can come back and forth. I can take a knee whenever I need to. And I'm puffing my back up. And this is plank. We did this yesterday. And we did a nice plank challenge. So if I want to go to side plank, I can drop a knee and open up. All right, and look up. And I can do it both ways. So I come back, drop a knee, open up, look up. Or maybe I'm feeling strong, I'm pushing into the ground. I turn, I'm on the edge of my foot, I stack my feet, and I'm in my side plank. From here, that's where you can play. So if you're feeling comfortable here, and it's a balance pose too, you can lift legs, you can drop legs back and open up. There's so many things you can do. Or you can stay here, or you can keep your knee down and just play around. But again, it's a way to just kind of engage your entire body. So we're going to do that on the other side. So I can always come, this is called tabletop. It's a nice resting pose, or just to get your balance back and get your posture back. So here I am pressing my palms in. I'm going to first come into plank. I'm going to decide if I want to take a knee and open up, or maybe I want to just go on the outside of my foot, open up, and that's when I get to play, right? And I can flow and do what I want with it. And it's fun. So have fun with that. Take another breath here in my plank. I got this. And I'm going to come to my knees. I'm going to sit back. This is called Thunderbolt. So I'm in my Thunderbolt pose. I'm going to close my eyes for a moment. One hand comes on my belly, one hand comes on my heart. Deep breath in through my nose. Exhale slowly. Another deep breath in through my nose. Exhale slowly. And one more cycle of 3 breaths. Inhale through my nose. Belly's going to puff out. Chest rises. And then I exhale really slowly, all that air out. I'll just take another moment with my eyes closed, just feeling the sensations in my body, letting myself feel present here now, concentrating, so that we can begin Catcher in the Rye, chapter 9. Here we are. All right, Mila, you into this? Yeah, Mila, she's got it. All right. So with that, we're going to get into chapter 9, Catcher in the Rye. So get yourself in. I'm going to stay here, a nice little cushion. But if you need to take a pause and get to your learning space, hit pause, and then we'll do a share and get into our chapter 9, Catcher in the Rye lesson. All right. So here we go. And I'm proud of you for doing these little, physical challenges. Add a few of those into your day, and before you know it, you become a little pro. All right, here we are, chapter 9, Catcher, and we're really moving along. We've got our Schoology page, chapter 9, Catcher lesson. So and this is where everything is being housed, right, for Catcher. I'm going to make folders, so it might start to look a little bit different, but you'll be able to still find all of your Catcher materials in this folder. So here's my Catcher chapter 9 lesson plan. We did our movement. You've got your side plank, you're energized, you've got focus, you're ready to start. And then if you need a quick chapter 8 review, you can hit pause and check out this. They're like 2-minute reviews. They're a nice quick overview of the chapter that we read previously. That was the chapter where he was on the train leaving Penn Station and coming to New York City. So then once you've done that, if you feel like you need to do a little review, we're going to get into chapter 9. So chapter 9 is the first chapter where Holden is in New York City. It is still Saturday night. So when we're talking about setting, we'll continue talking about setting. The time period, it's like a Romeo and Juliet, right? Where it's this very condensed time period. It's a long weekend. So everything kind of feels like it's in real time. So he's on the train. It's Saturday night. He's arrived in the city. It's still Saturday night, just later that evening. So he arrives in the city. It's Saturday night. So the setting's going to change again. But now the rest of this story will take place in New York City. So we'll start to move around the city and get comfortable with Manhattan in particular, which is fun. All right, I love New York City, and all of these places that he kind of moves around to make you feel like you're taking a little trip to New York City. So that's our setting, and we'll continue with some symbolism. So again, we're always going to be focusing on Holden's hat, the red hunting hat. He mentions it a lot. It's the major symbol in this story, but there are other symbols. So there's one that's going to come up pretty quickly in chapter 9 that we'll take a look at. So we'll look at a newer symbol. It was mentioned briefly in a previous chapter, but we haven't spent that much time on it. So we'll look at a new symbol, and we'll dig into another theme. So now you'll start to notice that we're getting toward the halfway mark of the book. The themes become more like clear. So in the beginning of the book, there's hints at what the themes are, the central messages and ideas, but you really need that plot development in order to peel back the layers, the deeper layers of meaning, which is what you get with theme. So we're starting to get there, and that's, as a reader, or even as a writer, that's where it becomes fun, and that's where you start to think and really engage, and you get past just the introductory and you really start to dig into the quality material here. So the theme that we'll dig into with this chapter, or the themes, there are 2, they go hand in hand, is the notion of conformity, conforming to the rules, right, and rebellion, kind of just doing your own thing, right? And just not being a conformist, going outside of the box and having your own little fun, right? So we'll look at those two things because that's something that Holden is struggling with in his life at this point in time. So with that, we've got symbolism and theme. And then the last thing we'll talk about is digging into the language. So we had a Holden speak assignment where we start looking at some of the language that Holden's using and that Salinger uses. So we'll continue with that, and we'll have a creative writing challenge to come where you try to use some of this Holden speak and this stream of consciousness, first person narration style, and do your own little Holden speak creative writing challenge out there. So be on the lookout for that. And that's really our focus for this lesson. So with that said, let's get into chapter 9. So here's chapter 9. I'm in my PDF again. This is the Catcher PDF. You can find this in a variety of places. It's on Schoology. It's also, if you just Google up PDF, I think I posted it in the description of one of the first YouTube videos for Catcher. There should be a PDF in the description, this PDF, but we're in chapter 9. So page 32 in the PDF, chapter 9, there's a 9 floating there just to give you an idea. And we'll get started. So again, we're arriving in New York City. The first thing I did when I got off at Penn Station, which is a train station in New York City, don't be confused with the word Penn there, I went into this phone booth. Again, time period, right? There's a phone booth. I felt like giving somebody a buzz. I left my bags right outside the booth so that I could watch them. But as soon as I was inside, I couldn't think of anybody to call up. My brother DB was in Hollywood. My kid's sister goes to bed around 9 o'clock, so I couldn't call her up. She wouldn't have cared if I woke her up, but the trouble was she wouldn't have been the one that answered the phone. My parents would have been the ones. So that was out. Then I thought of giving Jane Gallagher's mother a buzz and find out when Jane's vacation started, but I didn't feel like it. Besides, it was pretty late to call up. Then I thought of calling this girl I used to go around with quite frequently, Sally Hayes, because I knew her Christmas vacation had started already. She'd written me this long, phony letter inviting me over to help her trim the Christmas tree, Christmas Eve and all. But I was afraid her mother'd answer the phone. Her mother knew my mother, and I could picture her breaking a goddamn leg to get to the phone and tell my mother I was in New York. Besides, I wasn't crazy about talking to old Mrs. Hayes on the phone. She once told Sally I was wild. She said I was wild and that I had no direction in life. Then I thought of calling up this guy that I went to the Wooten school when I was there, Carl Luce, but I didn't like him much, so I ended up not calling anybody. I came out of the booth after about 20 minutes or so, got my bags, walked over to the tunnel where the cabs are, got a cab. I'm so damn absent-minded, I gave the driver my regular address, just out of habit and all. I mean, I completely forgot I was going to shack up in a hotel for a couple days and not go home till vacation started. I didn't think of it till we were halfway through the park. Then I said, hey, do you mind turning around when you get a chance? I gave you the wrong address. I want to go back downtown. The driver was sort of a wise guy. I can't turn around here, Mac. This here's a one-way. I have to go all the way to 90th Street now. I didn't want to start an argument. Okay, I said. Then I thought of something. All of a sudden. Hey, listen, I said, you know those ducks in the lagoon right near Central Park South? That little lake? By any chance, do you know where they go, the ducks, when it gets all frozen over? Do you happen to know by any chance? I realized it was only one chance in a million. He turned around and looked at me like I was a madman. What are you trying to do, bud? He said. Kid me? No, I was just interested, that's all. He didn't say anything more, so I didn't either, until we came out of the park at 90th Street. Then he said, all right, buddy, where to? Well, the thing is, I don't want to stay at any hotels on the east side where I might run into some acquaintances of mine. I'm traveling incognito, I said. I hate saying corny things like traveling incognito, but when I'm with somebody that's corny, I always act corny too. Do you happen to know those bands at the Taft or the New Yorker by any chance? If there's bands at the Taft or the New Yorker by any chance? No idea, Mac. Well, take me to the Edmont then, I said. Would you care to stop on the way and join me for a cocktail? On me, I'm loaded. Can't do it, Mac, sorry. He certainly was good company, terrific personality. We got to the Edmont and I checked in. I put on my red hunting cap when I was in the cab, just for the hell of it, but I took it off before I checked in. I didn't want to look like a screwball or something, which is really ironic. I didn't know then that the goddamn hotel was full of perverts and morons, screwballs all over the place. They gave me this very crummy room, with nothing to look out of the window at except the other side of the hotel. I didn't care much. I was too depressed to care whether I had a good view or not. The bellboy that showed me to the room was this very old guy around 65. He was even more depressing than the room was. He was one of those bald guys that comb all their hair over from the side to cover up the baldness. I'd rather be bald than do that. Anyway, what a gorgeous job for a guy around 65 years old, carrying people's suitcases and waiting around for a tip. I suppose he wasn't too intelligent or anything, but it was terrible anyway. After he left, I looked out the window for a while, with my coat on and all. I didn't have anything else to do. You'd be surprised what was going on the other side of the hotel. They didn't even bother to pull their shades down. I saw one guy, a gray-haired, very distinguished-looking guy, with only his shorts on, do something you wouldn't believe me if I told you. First, he put his suitcase on the bed. Then he took out all these women's clothes and put them on. Real women's clothes. Silk stockings, high-heeled shoes, brassiere, and one of those corsets with the straps hanging down and all. Then he put on this very tight black evening dress. I swear to God. Then he started walking up and down the room, taking these very small steps, the way a woman does, and smoking a cigarette and looking at himself in the mirror. He was all alone, too, unless somebody was in the bathroom. I couldn't see that much. Then, in the window, almost right over his, I saw a man and a woman squirting water out of their mouths at each other. It probably was highballs, not water, but I couldn't see what they had in their glasses. Anyway, first he'd take a swallow and squirt it all over her, then she did it to him. They took turns, for God's sakes. You should have seen them. They were in hysterics the whole time, like it was the funniest thing that ever happened. I'm not kidding. The hotel was lousy with perverts. I was probably the only normal bastard in the whole place, and that isn't saying much. I damn near sent a telegram to old Stradlater telling him to take the first train to New York. He'd have been the king of the hotel. The trouble was, that kind of junk is sort of fascinating to watch, even if you don't want it to be. For instance, that girl that was getting water squirted all over her face, she was pretty good looking. I mean, that's my big trouble. In my mind, I'm probably the biggest sex maniac you ever saw. Sometimes I can think of very crummy stuff I wouldn't mind doing if the opportunity came up. I can even see how it might be quite a lot of fun in a crummy way, and if you were both sort of drunk and all, to get a girl and squirt water or something all over each other's face. The thing is, though, I don't like the idea. It stinks if you analyze it. I think if you don't really like a girl, you shouldn't horse around with her at all. And if you do like her, then you're supposed to like her face. And if you like her face, you ought to be careful about doing crummy stuff to it, like squirting water all over it. It's really too bad that so much crummy stuff is a lot of fun sometimes. Girls aren't too much help either. When you start trying not to get too crummy, when you start trying not to spoil anything really good, I knew this one girl a couple of years ago that was even crummier than I was. Boy, was she crummy. We had a lot of fun, though, for a while in a crummy way. Sex is something I really don't understand too hot. You never know where the hell you are. I keep making up these sex rules for myself, and then I break them right away. Last year, I made a rule that I was going to quit horsing around with girls. That, deep down, gave me a pain in the ass. I broke it, though, the same week I made it. The same night, as a matter of fact. Spent the whole night necking with a terrible phony named Anne Louise Sherman. Sex is something I just don't understand. I swear to God I don't. I started toying with the idea while I kept standing there, giving old Jane a buzz. I mean, calling her long distance at BM, where she went, instead of calling her mother to find out when she was coming. We weren't supposed to call students up late at night, but I had it all figured out. I was going to tell whoever answered the phone that I was her uncle. I was going to say her aunt had just got killed in a car accident, and I had to speak to her immediately. It would have worked too. The only reason I didn't do it was because I wasn't in the mood. If you're not in the mood, you can't do that stuff, right? After a while, I sat down in the chair and smoked a couple of cigarettes. I was feeling pretty horny. I have to admit it. Then all of a sudden, I got this idea. I took out my wallet and started looking for this address a guy I met at a party last summer that went to Princeton gave me. Finally, I found it. It was all a funny color for my wallet, but you could still read it. It was the address of this girl that wasn't exactly a whore or anything, but that didn't mind doing it once in a while. This Princeton guy told me. He brought her to a dance at Princeton once, and they nearly kicked him out for bringing her. She used to be a burlesque stripper or something. I went over to the phone and gave her a buzz. Her name was Faith Cavendish, and she lived at the Stanford Arms Hotel on 65th and Broadway. A dump, no doubt. For a while, I didn't think she was home or something. Nobody kept answering. Then finally, somebody picked up the phone. Hello, I said. I made my voice quite deep so that she wouldn't suspect my age or anything. I have a pretty deep voice anyway. Hello, this woman's voice said, none too friendly either. Is this Miss Faith Cavendish? Who's this? She said. Who's calling me up at this crazy goddamn hour? That sort of scared me a little bit. Well, I know it's quite late, I said, in this very mature voice and all. I hope you'll forgive me, but I was very anxious to get in touch with you. I said it suave as hell. I really did. Who is this? She said. Well, you don't know me, but I'm a friend of Eddie Birdsall's. He suggested that if I were in town sometime, we ought to get together for a cocktail or two. Who? You're a friend of who? Boy, she was a real tigress over the phone. She was damn near yelling at me. Edmund Birdsall, Eddie Birdsall, I said. I couldn't remember if his name was Edmund or Edward. I only met him once at a goddamn stupid party. I don't know anybody by that name, Jack. And if you think I enjoy being woke up in the middle, Eddie Birdsall from Princeton, I said. You could tell she was running the name over in her mind and all. Birdsall from Princeton College? That's right, I said. You from Princeton College? Well, approximately. Oh, how is Eddie? She said. This is certainly a peculiar time to call a person up, though. Jesus Christ. He's fine. He has to be remembered to you. Well, thank you. Remember me to him, she said. He's a grand person. What's he doing now? She was getting friendly as hell all of a sudden. Oh, you know, same old stuff, I said. How the hell did I know what he was doing? I hardly knew the guy. I didn't even know if he was still at Princeton. Look, I said, would you be interested in meeting me for a cocktail somewhere? By any chance, do you have any idea what time it is? She said. What's your name anyhow? May I ask? She was getting an English accent all of a sudden. You sound a little on the young side. I laughed. Thank you for the compliment, I said, suave as hell. Holden Caulfield's my name. I should have given her a phony name, but I didn't think of it. Well, look, Mr. Coffel, I'm not in the habit of making engagements in the middle of the night. I'm a working gal. Tomorrow's Sunday, I told her. Well, anyway, I gotta get my beauty sleep. You know how it is. I thought we might just have one cocktail together. It isn't too late. Well, you are very sweet, she said. Where are you calling from? Where are you at now, anyways? Me? I'm in a phone booth. Oh, she said. Then there was this very long pause. Well, I'd like awfully to get together with you sometime, Mr. Coffel. You sound very attractive. You sound like a very attractive person, but it is late. I could come up to your place. Well, ordinary, I'd say grand. I mean, I'd love to have you drop up for a cocktail, but my roommate happens to be ill. She's been laying here all night without a wink of sleep. She just, this minute, closed her eyes and all, I mean. Oh, that's too bad. Where are you stopping at? Perhaps we could get together for cocktails tomorrow. I can't make it tomorrow, I said. Tonight's the only time I can make it. What a dope I was. I shouldn't have said that. Oh, well, I'm awfully sorry. I'll say hello to Eddie for you. Will you do that? I hope you enjoy your stay in New York. It's a grand place. I know it is. Thanks. Good night, I said. Then I hung up. Boy, I really fouled that up. I should have at least made it for cocktails or something. End of chapter 9. All right. So let's do a quick, chat about chapter 9. So chapter 9, we find Holden for the first time in New York City. So he's in New York City. Well, not for the first time, for the first time in the story. He's from New York City, so he's familiar with it. But he's in New York City. It's the first chapter for the book that he's in New York City. He arrives at Penn Station at night. That's a train station. And then he gets a cab ride. So that's what I want to talk about first. In the cab, he discusses the ducks at the pond in Central Park South. And typically we'd go on a field trip and we'd see that pond. So I'll post some pictures and we'll do a little, virtual Central Park thing. I know it's not the real thing, but we'll do some sort of virtual tour. But there's this part, there's this part of the park, if you've been there, Central Park South. So Central Park South, there's like by the zoo, if you've been to the Central Park Zoo, there's this pond, and that's what he's talking about. There's these ducks on the pond, and he says, I wonder where they go in the winter, to the cab driver. The cab driver's like, what? Are you crazy? What are we talking about? And so that's a symbol in this book. So we'll keep thinking about it, and we'll think, why does Holden care about the ducks? Doesn't he know that birds migrate, which we bring up? Why is it so curious if they stay or if they go? And why might that be a symbol? So think about that. I want you to ponder that. Why might the ducks in the park, on the pond, the lagoon in Central Park South, where they go in the winter, why is that possibly a symbol in this book? So just keep thinking about that, because he will bring it up again and again. And we'll have a further discussion, but just some food for thought. We see the hat again. We know that's a major symbol. He puts it on and he takes it off. It's, again, I like to call it, a symbol for Holden's emotions. If he's feeling like insecure, he'll turn it forward and pull it down. If he's feeling more bold and confident, he turns it with the peek around back the way he likes it. And then this time, notice what he does with the hat. He puts it on, then he takes it off. Where does he take it off? He takes it off. I'll pause so you can think. You got it? So he takes it off when he gets to the hotel, because he doesn't want to look like a screwball, which then he says is ironic as he starts describing the scenes that he sees when he gets inside this hotel room. So that's our conformity rebellion conversation. He gets a hotel room at this place called the Edmont Hotel. How's he have money? I'm going to pause again. How's Holden have all this dough? He even asked the cab driver to go out for a drink. He's like, I'm loaded. I got all this dough. Where's Holden getting his money from? Anyone? There's a couple places that Holden has money from. One, his grandmother. His grandmother has sent him money because he says she's very forgetful and just continues to send him money at various times of the year. She'll think it's his birthday, and he saves some of the money from grandma. So he's got money from grandma. Two, right when he left Pensy, he sold something. Pause again. Remember what he sold right before he left Pensy? He sold his typewriter, right? So he sold his typewriter and he got some cash for the typewriter. So between those two sources, Holden has some money. He's hoping to, make it a few days in New York City. So he gets this hotel room. So he's at the Edmont Hotel and he gets the room and he starts looking out the window and he sees these events happening in the other windows of the hotel. And he describes them. He says, oh, it was full of perverts, right? People just doing things that you wouldn't be accustomed to seeing. And when you think about what he's describing, they're things that are rebellious, right? Especially in the 1950s. The 1950s was a time period of conformity. And Holden's struggling with that. He's struggling with the fact that his family and his society, they just want him to conform. Even that one girl, Sally Hayes' mom, mentions, oh, he's wild. Like, what's he going to do with his life? Is he going to get it together? Like, you should follow this single path. Like, there's one narrative for all of us. And that's where Holden is struggling. And so I really do like this chapter in that he's arriving to New York City. He's struggling with the idea of conformity, that he doesn't want to follow this path, this projected path that seems to be laid out for him to follow. And he doesn't know that he wants to follow that. So he's having that existential crisis of existence, because it's like a person versus society. His society is trying to force him into this box and put him on a path. And he's not so sure he wants that. It's not going well for him. So then we see these acts of rebellion. And I think that that's purposeful by Salinger, that in this first chapter where Holden's in New York City, one of the first things Holden sees when he gets to the hotel room are acts of rebellion, especially for the 1950s. People doing things that are not conforming, right? So they're doing things that are maybe not traditionally things that they would be doing. And he sees them doing this through these hotel room windows. So it's almost like this location where people have come to do things that are sort of rebellious, or sort of like not the expected conventions of the society that they're living in. So that's kind of interesting to consider. And Holden does start considering that, and we get that theme of conformity and rebellion really showing up for us in this chapter. Then at the end of the chapter, talking about our theme of rebellion, he decides on a whim to give this woman a call named Faith Cavendish, and he describes her as someone that an acquaintance of his knew, who was a burlesque stripper who escorted him to a dance, this other kid, to a dance at Princeton. So again, we've got like Holden's society. He hangs out with these people who are just, you know, of a certain class. This kid's at Princeton, bringing an escort to a dance. He says he almost got kicked out of the dance. It, you know, was something like not traditional. It was an act of rebellion. And then Holden decides, he's like, all right, I'm going to call that girl. I'm going to call that girl. He's feeling a little rebellious. So this chapter, I think, really sparks some rebellion for Holden. And the fact that he's now in the city, he doesn't want to do the things that he was supposed to be doing that were laid out for him. He wants to try something different. So this is a chapter that sparks rebellion, and I like that. So he will see what's in store for Holden now that he's been, you know, inspired to do some rebelling of his own. So with that, we'll check in again for, you know, chapter 10, and be well out there. All right, see you later.